What's up, everybody? This is Rob of Archangel Link, www.archangelink.com, and it is my pleasure to have a first-time author, Sean Valiente, with us tonight. And he's taken a little bit of an interesting approach to creating his first book, and I thought it might be of interest to some of the viewers and listeners and followers out there. And so I wanted to say thank you, Sean, for joining us, and appreciate having you on for a little video chat here.
Yeah, thanks, Rob, for having me. This is my first video chat, so this will be pretty exciting for me.
Cool, awesome. Well, I appreciate you doing it, and so let's get right down to it. So, Sean, you're a first-time author. You've taken, as I mentioned, a bit of an unconventional approach to this first project that you have, and I think that your model may be of interest to some individuals in our audience. So, if you would tell us a little bit about it. How did you decide you wanted to take this approach? You consider any other paths, any of that. So please feel free to just start to share a little bit about what you're doing here.
Yeah, no problem. So the book series is called The Knights of Nine, and my first book in a fingers crossed planned 10-book series is The Lightning Knight. It took me about 10 years of crafting the actual story in my head and taking notes, and then about 6 months to write and another year to edit it. And then I decided that if I was ever actually going to finish and put it out into the world, I needed to actually publish it. There's a couple of different options. The two main options are, traditional publishing, where you find an agent, then they help you find a publisher. It gets distributed like an orbits.com or a tor.com or something like that. Or the other one, which is very popular now, self-publishing, which can be as easy as uploading your book onto Amazon KDP and sending it out to the world, or a little bit more time intensive if you want to do it a little bit more kind of a pseudo traditional style. So looking into those two options, I realized that traditional publishing, while it's great, it has a amazing distribution. But for me, I was a little bit more entrepreneurial. I've worked in a couple of startups. I've been around marketing and operations and finance and things of that nature. So I found self-publishing to be a lot of hard work, but B, kind of exciting and a mystery. It's a little bit of a wild, wild west out there for self-publishing. So trying to figure it all out. And what I realized is that when you go down the road of self-publishing, there's, a few different options of what you can do. The first thing you can do is just put your book on Amazon and see if it sells. This can be a little bit scary, especially if, your book's out there for a year and you only get maybe 10 people to buy your book. But another thing that people were starting to do that I noticed, and I had actually backed one of these projects, was use a crowdfunding platform to help garner interest and use it as a pseudo marketing tool and a little bit of a help of a kind of advance payment, if you will. So I decided to follow in that footstep and use a crowdfunding platform to help kind of raise funds and raise awareness and see if my book was worth people's time and effort and ultimately money. And that's how I decided to go the self-publishing and crowdfunding route.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you for giving a little background on it. So one of the things that I noticed, and I'll give a tiny bit of background about my familiarity or minimal as it is with traditional publishing. My company co-founder was a health and fitness and nutrition writer, and we had kind of talked about getting into the traditional publishing arena. And so I, probably like you, researched a little bit, tried to figure out how to write a query letter, how to drum up some interest in what's going on. And one of the things that we found was your viability, at least as far as traditional publishing houses are concerned, for their consideration in publishing you, is what sort of platform you have already and how many readers can you bring, basically. How many sales can you more or less guarantee as part of your organic audience before they'll even think about publishing it. And it's kind of one of those situations, and this is why we ended up forming this self-publishing company. If you're going to have to do a lot of the legwork yourself, if you're going to have to do a lot of the audience building yourself, you might as well retain a greater degree of control of the project, where it goes, of pricing, and then also keep more of the back end for yourself if you elect to go that self-publishing route rather than ceding your rights over to a publishing house. Now, as you mentioned, there are a lot of great features that publishing houses have. There's great distribution. There's various opportunities that they have based on their economy of scale and networks of connections and all of that. But for a lot of authors, the traditional publishing route is not particularly attractive. And that's why a lot of folks end up working with Archangel Link, and even if they don't work with us, going the self-publishing route. And it sounds like that was kind of the experience that you came on. And I really like this crowdsourcing model. You mentioned that you had seen other projects kind of take that route and backed it. And it's just something that I guess I had heard a little bit about, but hadn't really any experience with it. And so when I learned about you and what you were up to, I was really excited to hear from somebody who's working with that and in the midst of that. So I just think that's really, really cool. And again, thank you for giving us a little insight into that experience.
Yeah, I think you really nailed hit the nail on the head with the idea that while traditional publishing is kind of this monolith of power, specifically around distribution, they also have a lot of other things that might be kind of scary or might put off a lot of authors from going the self-publishing route, namely like, how do I find an editor, or how do I find a book cover, or how do I typeface, or what are the other kind of experiences that I need? And even though they offer all those services, which you yourself could find freelancing, but even though they offer all that, they still expect you as an author to sort of market yourself and create a readership and do all that. So, and that's kind of what really sells the book, is what you do as an author to kind of sell. So with that being said, there's so many gatekeepers in kind of the traditional publishing kind of path, where you're finding an agent, your query letters. And if you go down to like writing Twitter and just type in like hashtag writing community or hashtag am writing, you'll see thousands of tweets that are just like, sent my 100th query in today, been 6 months or been 1 year and still no response. I'm still going to keep trying. And all these other authors like, oh man, we're in the same boat, stay strong. And once you even get past that hurdle, it's trying to have your agent sell to a big publishing house. And then once you get past that hurdle, it seems like it's all downhill from there, but then it's using their editors and using their artwork and using their distribution. And then on top of that, you still have to sell. So if you have a little bit of maybe gumption and want to kind of dip your toe in the deep end, doing all the things that a traditional publisher would do in terms of kind of the back end of your book, the editing, all of that stuff, you can kind of do on your own, especially if you're going to be doing a lot of the marketing yourself. So self-publishing can be really exciting in that aspect, but also can be a little bit scary for a lot of people who don't necessarily think they have the skills, which is funny because, most authors I know of, especially myself, have no, English writing background, right? The most English writing background I had was in high school. My major in college was corporate finance and accounting, and my minor was computer information systems. I'm a numbers nerd through and through, but, I still went in head first and tried writing a book. So if you take that kind of approach into kind of the business aspect of self-publishing, you can find all these resources and really just take the bull by the horns and go for it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I appreciate that insight. Yeah, I think that when Yeah, if you approach it as you described, kind of analytically and, with an eye toward, okay, what's the big picture? What's the system here? And how do I engage with each level of the process? Then, yeah, you really do have a lot of opportunities. And certainly it can be overwhelming. There are so many different paths out there. There are a million different articles on how to self-publish and all of that. But if you are willing to do the legwork, if you have a little sweat equity to invest in orienting yourself a little bit and getting familiar with what's out there, then you really can, as you said, take the bull by the horns and create something that's really a reflection of you and your values and your desires and your goals. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of going down that path, I found that using a crowdfunding tool was actually super helpful in kind of orienting myself around the process. If you go into the process and you're just like, oh, I don't know what to do first, I don't know what to do second, I used kind of this crowdfunding campaign as my anchor around what I needed to do and what my timeline needed to be, and then use similar campaigns I saw about books, and specifically fantasy books, which is what I wrote, around what they were raising funds for, what they were going to do with their funds, or what process they took. So that was actually a really helpful kind of sort of North Star for my self-publishing journey.
Cool. Yeah, like it provided a skeleton or a framework to figure out what the different elements were that you needed to kind of research and learn about as you went along. It sounds like.
Yeah, it was really great. Choosing the crowdfunding platform can be a little bit tricky, though.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. Tell me, what platform did you elect for, and why did you elect for that? What considerations went into it, and what made that your choice ultimately a good fit for you?
Yeah. So in the crowdfunding world, there's kind of two really main players. There's the GoFundMe, and then there's the Kickstarter. If you've ever heard of GoFundMe, most of the time it's probably been in relation to somebody has maybe medical bills they need to pay, or a disaster has happened, or they're trying to raise funds for a nonprofit, things of that nature. And if you've ever heard of a Kickstarter campaign, usually it's a little bit more product based, a little more product oriented. But beyond that, there's really one major difference between the two platforms. GoFundMe, you set a amount that you want to raise. If you don't raise it, that's totally fine. You just get any money that you have raised. With Kickstarter, you set a goal. If you don't hit your goal, you don't get the money, and none of your backers get charged money. And it sort of creates this little bit of a proof of concept and a little bit of a urgency around the product, right? Like if this campaign doesn't hit their goal, you won't be able to get the book. So tell all your friends about it. And it also means like if you don't hit your goal, well, there wasn't really enough interest either organically through your own life or just in the wider world for your book. And maybe you should try either going a different route or retailoring your approach or things of that nature. I ended up ultimately going with Kickstarter for those reasons. I wanted to see if my personal network and my idea was good enough to actually hit a goal and prove my concept of, hey, this should be something that should be out in the world. And B, I wanted to create this kind of false scarcity of like, hey, this is going to be gone soon. We need to back it. And I'm lucky enough to have a modestly large personal network, especially of like people I really know and trust, and their networks and things of that nature. So while I was a little bit hesitant of like, oh no, I hope I hit my goal, I really thought that if I put time and effort into it, I could succeed.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I like the idea of the proof of concept. That's really valuable. That's really valuable information, particularly if the end result is some sort of product that you're offering, is something that you've created. I mean, I've seen various Kickstarters for camping equipment or kitchen gadgets or that kind of thing, and
Yeah.
obviously when your goal is a little bit more modest and a little bit more personal, it's easier to kind of rely on your own network than, if you have $100,000 goal or $1 million goal or something like that. That said, the proof of concept is really valuable, both, as you mentioned, for yourself and what sort of interest that people have in, your creative work, and then what sort of interest the broader market has in that particular genre that you're working in, the story that you're trying to tell. And I imagine that's probably pretty satisfying and validating once you hit that, and okay, there's at least going to be a handful of people in the world who are going to read this book, and all these hours and time spent that I put into creating this world, there's someone out there. There's a few dozen people, a few hundred people out there who are curious and interested and excited about it.
Yeah, it was definitely interesting. I had been lucky enough to sort of experience it from the opposite side, from a backer side. So a couple of years ago, I had a friend from high school, and he had a friend who I had never even known, who was an English teacher, and he had written a book. It was a fantasy book. I was a nerd. I was like, I love fantasy books and I love helping people out. So he had posted on his Facebook, like, hey, help my friend out. He had a Kickstarter for his book. I looked at his Kickstarter. I was like, this is kind of cool. I had seen Kickstarters in the past and had backed it, but never for a book. And it really made me think like, oh, if I ever want to do a self-publishing thing, like this might be the route I really want to go down. Ultimately, his goal, he had beat it by about $57. So I got the book in the mail when it was supposed to come out. But that gave me a little bit of pause and hesitancy around like, do I want to make sure that, I set a goal, or if I don't hit my goal, what would happen? Mm-hmm. So that was a little bit of hesitancy around starting it. But after some point, you just, jump in head first and hope you come out of the water.
Right. Yeah. No, that all makes sense. So possibly related, tell me a little bit about what are some of the things that you wish that you had known going into it that you know now, and that other people out there who are considering this approach might want to know going into it.
Yeah. So a little bit of background in terms of my fundraising style. For the past couple of years, I've used my birthday as a fundraiser to raise money for charity, a charity called Charity Water. And so for the last couple of years, I've raised $1,500 and $2,500. So I knew kind of the maximum sort of threshold I could maybe squeeze out of my personal network. And for this year, I wanted to do that around my Kickstarter campaign. So building it around some type of event was really handy. However, I ended up pushing it off by like a week. So I didn't really get the full effect of like, it's my birthday. It was more of like, my birthday was last week, right. Sort of thing. So in retrospect, maybe a little bit more prep time around that. Mm-hmm. But some of the technical things around crowdfunding and Kickstarter in particular that I really wish I would have done beforehand and not throughout the campaign, just to try and build momentum a little bit better, was the first thing was creating more media. So when you start to build your crowdfunding and your Kickstarter campaign, it always says like you have an option for a picture, a static picture, and there's an option to put a video as well. And they always say video, increases your ability to garner traffic by like 43% or something like that. Mm-hmm. So I had this dumb little 15-second teaser trailer that I made, and that was about it. I had no kind of static artwork. I had no banners. The teaser trailer wasn't even really that great. It was kind of cool. I really wish I would have taken like, a couple of months to really get a bunch of artwork done, get a bunch of media done, maybe do you'll see this a lot with book authors. They'll do kind of a pitch video telling you about the world or things of that nature. And those can be really handy and really helpful. So I really wish more media at the beginning. The more media you can have before you launch kind of anything that you can kind of use strategically, the better. So like when you hit a certain milestone, give an update like, hey, we hit this milestone. By the way, here's a picture of the castle that they're going to be in or something like that. Just try and re-engage people who've already backed you, and then engage even more people who have maybe driven by and said, oh, that looks interesting, I'll come back later. Um, yeah. The second big thing was building out kind of a timing strategy, specifically to go along with that media, but also with kind of an updates sort of thing, and how often I want to reach out and how often I wanted to post. So I reached out to everybody I knew, and then like a couple of days later, I reached out to a couple more people. I didn't really have a clear strategy about like, I'll ping these people first, I'll ping these people second, and then in 2 weeks I'll follow up, and then a week after that I'll follow up, and things of that nature, and the type of messages. In marketing, this is often referred to as a drip campaign, right? So you'll get an email, you get a second email, and they always kind of say it's a little bit different of a thing. I didn't really plan that out. And I think that would have been really helpful, because I've seen a lot of my outreach be like, oh yeah, I'll take a look, but no follow up with like, hey, by the way, there's only like, a few days left. Did you take a look at it? I just want to make sure in case you wanted to back it, sort of thing. Another thing is working on a kind of a social media strategy. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, those are kind of the big three. I found Snapchat wasn't really the audience that I wanted, and actually the best audience was sort of Instagram, and that's where having media in your back pocket comes in handy, and making kind of a regimented sort of posting schedule. So like once a day, twice a day, during these times with these kind of hashtags that you've researched that are sort of in the vicinity of kind of your theme of your book and your theme as an author, and doing it so you're just creating momentum and creating a buildup. And then kind of the last thing, which is actually two parts, but it's super important, that I discovered halfway through and that I track, it's twofold. And Kickstarter is really awesome about this. So one is using Google Analytics as a tie into your Kickstarter. There is a section for it on your campaign, and setting up a Google Analytics account is super easy. That's just to track like where your backers are coming from, where your visitors are coming from, whether you should be putting in more time into certain aspects or less time in certain aspects. And Google Analytics can be really hard to actually navigate and use, but setting up at the beginning is so helpful, because you can always find out later information or ask your buddy who's an SEO, works at an SEO company, like, what does this even mean? I didn't set up till halfway through, so like most of my data is like, half there and half not. But kind of the biggest key with Kickstarter is you are able to create custom URLs. And this was super important, and I didn't really think it through until halfway through, is every post that you do, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's a message, whether it's a text, whether it's on your personal website, whether it's on Instagram, whether you give it to a specific friend and you've told them to tell 5 of their friends, create a specific URL, and you can track where these people are coming from, right? So if you plan on doing, 3 Facebook posts, make one specific URL for Facebook post number 1, Facebook post number 2, and then Facebook post number 3. You can see which post resonates most with people. You can see if reaching out to people versus in text versus like Facebook Messenger or like on Instagram. Or you can do what I started to do, which was I had a friend at work, and she wanted to have her own scene in a chapter. She was very excited about this. And I actually have that as a reward on my website. But I made a deal with her instead, because I knew she was kind of popular. I had lots of friends. And I was like, instead of paying the full amount, the $150 tier reward, get 5 friends to back my book. And how I could track that was I just gave her specific URL. And I know if anybody backs my book through her URL, I can count it up super easy. And that creates more awareness with about the same amount of money that would have been backed originally. So custom URLs with Kickstarter is like huge. and is super important for tracking. I can't stress enough with a Kickstarter campaign about tracking and knowing where your backers are coming from, who they are, how you reached out to them. That way you can turn that information and say, okay, it worked this way on these types of people. Let me try it on these types of people as well.
Yeah, that's been huge, I would say, for us as well, to figure out where to focus our efforts in, with Archangel Link. And it wasn't even until a couple of months ago, maybe 6 months ago, we put a question on our contact form. Hey, how did you find out about us? I don't know why it didn't occur to us beforehand, but we have some of the Google Analytics stuff, and that's really not my forte, but folks on the team are a lot better about that than I am, and it's just having all that data is useful, and then you can analyze it, like you said. Even if you don't know what it means real time, you can go back and look at it a month later, 6 months later, and figure out, oh wow, that was really interesting. We had a little cluster of people coming over from this one thing that maybe we didn't even expect, and then you can, all right, well, maybe people like that, and I might want to resonate, or I might want to create more content like that will resonate with that target audience. So I think that's a really helpful information, and something I would encourage folks out there to do, to the extent that you can, because I know that especially as a first-time author, there are a million moving pieces. There are lots and lots of things going on that you don't even know what you don't know when you start out, and try to bridge those gaps and fill in those gaps of understanding. But having information like this, and again, even if you can't do a whole lot with it right now, being able to do something with it later and having that data on hand can really help with with situations like yours, where this might be the first of a series, and you might be creating other future projects or offshoots based on it, knowing, oh wow, people really love this particular thing. And as entrepreneurs, it's important to pay attention to your audience. It's important to listen to what people are actually interested in, and not try and force your will onto them. I mean, you kind of throw a bunch of things at the wall, and you hope that some of them stick. And sometimes you have a real vested interest in, well, I really like that. But if your audience doesn't like it, then if you're not willing to shift and adjust accordingly, then the next person who is doing something kind of like you in your competitive arena, and they are willing to shift, well, they're going to have that competitive advantage. And we're all fighting for people's eyeballs. We're fighting for people's attention and interest and all of that. So to the extent that we can respect our audience and provide them things that are hopefully in alignment with us, but then also in alignment with them, the more likely we are to find the sort of success that we're aiming for.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that drives me crazy, because I look at this stuff on a daily basis, and basically the only notification I have active on my phone is Kickstarter, is the biggest thing that drives me crazy is when I get a backer and I have no idea where they came from. I don't recognize the name, or it's a single name, or it's an anonymous name, and I have no idea where they've come from. No idea, like, oh, is it a person I reached out to personally? Because, I mean, a big thing with a crowdfunding campaign, especially with a book, is that you have to really, really, really tap into your own personal network, and you have to it's really important to be super shameless when you're self-promoting about things, and just like telling every single person it's nuts.
Right. Yeah, I think that's an important point, and being willing to sell yourself. So let's talk a little bit about that shameless self-promotion. When we were getting ready for the call, you mentioned trying to do it in a way that's not going to turn people off. And so if you would speak a little bit on that balance, threading that needle, how do you be a shameless self-promoter and at the same time keep people engaged, and not like, hey, get out of here, like, I hate being sold to, I don't want anything to do with you, stop calling.
Yeah. So I mean, I myself am not really a salesman. I don't like being a salesman. The most salesy I ever was in college, when I was working for the alumni fund. So you had to call people up and ask for money. Beyond that, I've had a kind of a natural inclination towards selling, but really kind of being more inviting about it. And the thing with a crowdfunding campaign, and you just have to get over this like kind of mental hurdle, is you have to reach out to every single person you've ever met in your entire life. And that means clicking on your Facebook, clicking on your friends, and writing each name down and saying, I'm going to reach out to you. I'm going to reach out to you. I'm going to reach out to you. Even if it's a person you haven't talked to in 10 years, since high school, since middle school, since elementary school. Or even if it's a person you met once at a party, and then going through your text messages and then asking your friends to ask their friends. And during your campaign, when you're at a party or you're at a game night or you're at your parents' house and your sister brought over her boyfriend, telling him about your book, you have to be really shameless about it and understand that that's the price of kind of selling. But you don't want to be encyclopedia salesman going to your door and saying, do you want to buy this box of encyclopedias? And it's 2019 and nobody wants that. One key thing I found in this kind of selling process, and I'll put it in quotes specifically because I'm not really trying to sell people, and that's the misnomer. Because you're not just putting something on Amazon or you're not just putting something on Barnes & Noble and saying, hey, check out my book. It's awesome. You're telling them, hey, I've started this campaign and I'm fundraising to help publish my book and I want you to be a part of it. And that's kind of the key driver. It's inviting them to be a part of something instead of just saying, be a consumer and be a customer of mine. And what really kind of sells that aspect of it is sincerity. If you can talk about your book, you can talk about why you wrote it, why it's personal to you, and then why you want them to be a part of it, not just for the money, but because you want them to be a part of the experience, and doing it in a kind of a no pressure situation. Not saying like, you're my friend, you have to buy my book. Like, yeah, sure, your friends that you see twice a week playing basketball, like those are the people you can say, have you bought my book yet? Because they have to see you next week. But the ones you're reaching out to that you haven't seen in forever, that you went to church camp with when you were, 8 years old, those are the ones you want to just be like, hey, I wrote this thing. It's really crazy. It's big. It's super personal to me. I'm really excited about it. Can you just check it out? If it's something you're interested in, I would love if you could support it and share it with your friends. If not, totally no worries. Just thank you for even like reading my message. Oftentimes with people I hadn't seen in a while or haven't talked to in a while, I would start the message with a little bit of a personal anecdote, right? So like, you might not talk to somebody, but all about their life if you just watch their Facebook on a daily basis. So like, hey, congratulations, heard you were pregnant. By the way, I have a book coming out. Or even, something silly like that, like, oh, congratulations on your new job. Hey, by the way, I have this crazy thing happening. And making it a little bit personal so it's not just like a copy and paste message, but at the same time, making it so that you're not saying, hey, I want you to be a customer of mine, but hey, as a friend, as a acquaintance, as a friend of a friend, this is a thing I did. I'd love for you to be a part of it. And that's really the kind of the big thing about being selly about it. And while you're being shameless, you're still being sincere. And that's kind of the big important thing.
Yeah, no, that's great. Those are really helpful tools and tactics and strategies for it. Just approaching it with that spirit of sincerity and then just reaching out and using it as a pretext too to reengage relationships that are potentially years or decades forgotten. Or
like, hey, ex-girlfriend, I know you dumped me and broke my heart, but you can make it up to me by buying my book.
By the way, that was terrible. Here's some karma opportunity.
I didn't, that ugly witch that they meet in chapter 2, that's totally not based off you, even though it has the same name and looks just like you, but I promise.
and lives on the same street as you. I don't know. Totally coincidence. Anyway, here.
Yeah.
here's my link.
Yeah, what's interesting is when you're selling to people, specifically people that you might not know as well. So, like in my personal kind of, within 10 feet friend group, I kind of know where their socioeconomic status is, right? Like what they could afford, that kind of thing, just based on how often I hang out with them, right? But some of these people who are like 100 feet, 1,000 feet, 35,000 feet away, and I haven't talked to in forever, I have no idea really what's going on in their life, what their situations are. And it was really kind of important to know that and understand that when I was going for the sell, and knowing that I had options for kind of a tier for everybody at whatever level they thought they could support, if they wanted to support. Because what you didn't want to do is get to a friend, you haven't talked to them in for a while, maybe they're going through a rough patch or something like that, and they can't afford a $50 backing, right? And making sure there's an opportunity for them to say, hey, I can't do a lot, but I can do this.
Right. Yeah, you don't want to come to somebody that you don't know necessarily and, hey, our friendship relies on you supporting me. The lowest price point is going to be $5,000.
Right.
Come on, buddy. So yeah, I think that's great. Let's move on to that next question, which is, how did you come up with your tiers of support? How did you determine that was those were going to be the various price points and bonuses and offers that you came up with for this project?
Yeah, so I did a bunch of research on tiers, pledge amounts, rewards. They're all kind of synonymous in the crowdfunding and Kickstarter world. It's basically you have an amount of money, and for that amount of money, you get X things from it. They call it rewards in Kickstarter. You become a backer by pledging, things of that nature. And in my research, what I did was I looked at other books, specifically in the fantasy realm. I looked at really high performing books from an author who had, done 32 different books that he had published, some traditional, some through Kickstarter, looked at his campaign and what kind of rewards he was doing. And then I looked at some smaller ones that were kind of more independent first time authors and what they were offering and what they could do. And then I really relied on the original Kickstarter that I had done a couple years ago for that friend of a friend who was basically in the same kind of comparable book to mine. It's kind of similar to, housing appraisals, like, right? Like, what's a comp to this house? It was like, what's a comp to my book? Well, it's not going to be, a hardcover edition of 151 Pokemon. It's going to be, another sort of fantasy novel written by a first time author. So going into that, the first thing that you really need to understand about your tiers is that every single one of them has to have the actual book. Like, people are coming to your campaign, and if they're going to back, they want the book. That's something that I've seen get lost sometimes, is like, here's $5, get a bookmark, or like, here, donate $10 and get an e-newsletter for me. Like, no. Every single tier needs to have a book, whatever form that is, right? Your lower tiers can easily have like a digital version, like a PDF that doesn't cost you anything to make. So at the very minimum, that's what you're trying to go for. And for me, I had kind of three different options of books. I had ebook, I had paperback, and I had hardcover. So at the very minimum, you have to offer your book. Originally, when I had started, I got really excited about it. And I was like, I'm going to have 10 different tiers, and they're all going to have varying rewards and levels. And they're going to start at like $5 and go to like $250. And you're going to have all of them in between and things like that. And in the end, I ended up paring it down to about 5. I have a friend who's a really good fundraiser. That was her job. And in the process of showing her all my tiers, we figured out that having 10 tiers creates a bit of a decision paralysis. Like, you get to a Kickstarter campaign, you're like, okay, I want this book, I want to fund this, I want to support this person, and all of a sudden it's like, what do I want to do? Well, I could do $25, I could do $22, I could do $15, I could do $35. Like, what do I do? Let me see all the different rewards. By the time they're trying to read it, 2 minutes have gone by, and they're just like, you know what, I'll just come back to it, and they forget. So really paring it down to kind of 5 basic kind of tiers, and breaking those tiers down to specific needs, right? So you want kind of the following tiers at the bare minimum. One is a low cost option, and this is like between $5 and $15. It's usually for book publishers. It's going to be like a digital version of your book, which is little to no cost, depending on what kind of digital format you're putting it in. Um, this gives you the ability to support the campaign, even if maybe you don't have the discretionary income to go a little bit higher for a book. And then after that, you want 2 to 3 kind of middle tier options between $20 and $40. Something to keep in mind is the average pledge around all of Kickstarter is $25. Like, of the thousands and hundreds of thousands of Kickstarter campaigns that are out there, most people can spend and pledge about $25. So that's kind of the sweet spot that you want. And that's where I kind of put my paperback version. Something to keep in mind is with your tiers, like as you go up in tiers, your tiers and your rewards need to include everything that was before it. After that, you should have some type of bundled tier. So specifically, you have different formats. You should have some type of way for somebody to say like, oh, I want a paperback and a hardcover and an ebook, because some people just want multiple versions of books for God knows what reason. But I mean, if they want to buy my books, go ahead, have at it.
Go for it.
And then after that, you want to start looking into your high price, high value tiers that come with all the bells and whistles plus more bells and whistles, but are low cost for you as a publisher, because you're self-publishing. So for me, I had a pretty high tier, it was like $100, and it was this. The big thing about this was you got the book, you got the bookmarks, you got all the stuff, but you were also able to name a character, and that cost me zero money. And to a person backing it, it is such high value because now they're going to be in the book forever. And like, that's my character. It was named after me or whatever name I wanted it to be. And they can point to that forever. And that's really big for them. And then after that, you want a like super high tier that nobody should ever pick, but you're going to get like 2 or 3 people to pick it. I don't know why, but like there are people out there who, when they do these kind of campaigns and back these kind of campaigns, they're like, I want the biggest and the best thing. I don't care how much money it is. And like, God bless those people. So those ones, you set the price super high for some odd reason. Like, I had $150 tier. Like, you don't need to spend $150 to buy my book. But what it came with was you were able to dictate and create an entire scene in my next book. So like, that has super high value for them, because when the next book comes out or this book comes out, they can say, this scene right here, that was my idea. And they get to be not only a part of the book, but a part of the whole process. And to them, it's totally worth it. And to you, once again, it costs nothing. So having those super high tiers available, as like, some people are just going to pick it out, and then having the low cost option for people who want to contribute but can't contribute much, and then remembering that your sweet spot is around $25 to $30.
Yeah. Cool. No, that's super helpful and actionable and useful information. One thing that it made me think of when I've worked in the restaurant and hospitality industry, one of my managers mentioned, hey, it's really nice to have a super high price point object just as a psychological anchor, so that everything else seems relatively affordable in comparison. And you can see that in all sorts of different arenas. But in this case, it was something like the equivalent of a Kobe beef steak in a otherwise just sort of a deli kind of restaurant. And it's like, all right, well, compared to the $100 Kobe steak, the $15 pastrami sandwich seems like a heck of a bargain. And that's really that's a good idea. I also I just wanted to mirror back at you that paradox of choice. Overwhelming people with too many options can be can be counterproductive. Like you said, people might kind of psychologically zone out and I'll come back to this later, and when I have a chance to parse the information and figure out what makes sense for me. And if that happens, you've lost them. It's just like anything in digital commerce. The more click throughs that you have to force a customer to go through, the more attrition there is at every stage. And so, where they have to kind of furrow their brow and think about, wait a second, hold on, but if I do the $22 one versus the $28 one, what are my choices again?
So yeah, this shouldn't be the Cheesecake Factory,
right?
Like,
exactly. Yeah, no, I think that's great. And in terms of web design as well, and one of the best pieces of information I had was what's the ideal outcome? What do you want people to get out of this? What's the perfect person, perfect site visitor, perfect campaign contributor? What do you want them to do? And then optimize for that, because you can only optimize for so many things at once, and you overwhelm them with choice, and you disperse any of that momentum or energy, and that's not what you want to do. So really great insights. I appreciate all of that. Let's talk a little bit about these tangible and intangible perks. You mentioned these things that as a creator aren't necessarily high cost for you, but are high value, and and sort of what that means, and all of that.
Yeah. So once again, at the end of the day, people want to buy your book, right? So that's kind of your ultimate tangible kind of reward for the crowdfunding. Is like, I actually get a book in my hand or on my Kindle, and I can look at it. Along the lines of that, you can think about other kind of sort of tangible rewards, whether that's a bookmark, that's pretty popular because it's a book, or artwork that you printed out and, sent in the mail with that. Or at one point I was like, maybe I'll get t-shirts. And then I was like, I don't know if people really want t-shirts. So thinking about kind of those kind of lower cost tangible items are pretty nice. But they don't necessarily have the high value. Right? Like, for me personally, my favorite bookmark is a $2 bill that I have. Like, it's a great bookmark. It's a great conversation starter. Like, hey, what's that? It's my bookmark. It's a $2 bill. I know it's worth money. It's great. But like, an artwork or a bookmark, like, it's low cost for you. It's a nice kind of, tangible piece that they can get as a reward. But at the end of the day, it's not that high value. Mm-hmm. What tends to be super high value is the things you can't touch. Mm-hmm. And the reason that people are going to your crowdfunding campaign is that they want to believe in you, they want to believe in your book, and they want to be a part of something, right? If you can incorporate them beyond just the pledging to be incorporated at no cost for you, that's great. So the intangible things for me were like, how can I make them a part of the book? Well, they can name characters, or they can name cities, or they can write a scene. At one point I was like, I have these 9, deities. You can name one of them. And my friend was like, don't give those away. Those are yours. Like the one for building out a scene, I call it scene stealing, right? And it's like really exciting. It's like, yeah, you get to be a part of it. I remember, years ago, I read in the newspaper, J.K. Rowling did a competition for children in the UK. It's like, write a scene and we'll pick one to be in the next Harry Potter book. In my head, I was like, oh my God, that's the coolest thing ever. The scene ended up being like some dumb scene where they were at study hall and people were like, didn't really like Harry Potter that much. And like, that was cool. Like, whatever. The scene didn't really matter that much, but for the person who actually wrote that scene, like, they get to say, oh my God, I'm in Harry Potter. And I want that kind of feeling with my book. And so these intangible kind of products or like rewards are so high value, but zero cost to you. And at the same time forges this relationship, because not only are you getting a backer, not only are they paying you, way more than they should for a book, but now they're going to tell everybody that they know, like, I'm in this book, buy this book because I'm in it. And that's super important, not only from like a marketing standpoint, but from just like garnering attention and like really getting to the core of what crowdfunding is, which is like a team effort.
Right. getting the crowd excited. Yeah, this makes me think of something a colleague of business development, a friend of mine, told me about, and she said oftentimes your best advocates can be your satisfied clients. One, if they have a good experience, that's great, but two, it's also you have this experience where they almost want to justify the decision that they already made.
Yeah.
And in this case, hey, yeah, I spent $150 on this book, and it was kind of crazy, but you should be really excited about it, and here, you should buy it too. And you have that energy and the momentum and passion, and you get people engaged, or actually you kind of recruit an engager for you, which is something I think is really valuable and helpful to think about. Again, if folks out there are thinking about doing crowdfunding, particularly in some sort of creative venture like book writing, how can you do that? How can you get that kind of buy-in and energy and momentum, and help people kind of slingshot what you're putting out there going forward? And as you said, being deliberate about it and being sort of lateral in your thinking. So it's not just, how can we have more and more expensive, artwork or lithographs, or, something that's going to, have a physical cost. It just gets you thinking outside of the box. What can I do that's interesting? One other quick story that I'll share, or anecdote I remember reading about, was a business class, and the instructor gave split the class into groups and gave them $20 and said, start a business, figure out who can have the most profitable business based on this $20 of seed capital. And as it turned out, in this particular story, the most profitable business didn't even use the seed capital. And the point was, when you have restrictions, and when you kind of take away the easy options, you have to think about creative options. And in this case, the easy option is, just give me more physical things that I'm going to write a check for. The more creative options are things like helping with world building, or in this case of the story, the $20, I think they ended up creating it was some sort of service for restaurants in a busy downtown area. They would have people wait online for them, so they can go out and browse, and then they would text them when it's almost their time. So it's like a table seating service, that was $10 or whatever it was. And so, in a few hours, they made the most profit of any of these other things. And that's kind of the idea. That's the point. You want to think outside of the box, and not necessarily go down the well-worn paths. Not that there isn't value in there, or cool things, but choose it mindfully and deliberately, and don't just do it because everybody else is doing it. So I like that approach, and I think that information and that recommendation is really valuable for prospective creators and crowdfunders out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. As we were talking, I got a new backer, and I have no idea where they came from. It's just like a guess. So
Nice.
It's just like you pay attention to these things all the time, especially with Kickstarter specifically, you set this goal, and you're like, I got to hit this goal. So it's on your mind all the time whenever you get a pledge, and you're like, oh my God, I got to check this pledge out. Who'd it come from? How can I get more? Kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, perfectly lead into the next question, which is, how did you come up with your goal? How did you determine what it was going to be? I know that there is some deliberation that has to happen, because, as you mentioned, if you get $1 short of the goal, that's it. That money is gone. It goes back from the escrow account into your backers' credit cards, or wherever they supported you from. And so, how did you come up with it? And then, how are you going to make use of those funds to move on to the next step?
Yeah. So there's really like two ways to create your goal. The first way, which is probably the smart way, is to plan out all your costs that you're going to incur to like physically publish and deliver your book. And then all your back end costs, like your editor, your artist, quitting your day job, all the coffee you have to buy to like directly inject into your veins to stay up and write this thing. You take all that total, you make your goal. If you can't reach that goal, then you have some type of proof of concept that, your return on your investment on your book isn't worth the time or the money that you're putting into it. And then you try a different tactic, right? Whether that's, a different kind of traditional publishing or a different way. And that's ultimately like kind of what you really want to do. See what your costs are. That's what I need to hit. Boom. The second way is to base it off, comparable, a comparable campaign, and then use your own best judgment of like what you think you can physically raise on your own. remembering that the average pledge is like $25 and go with that. For me, I ended up going with the second way, not the smart way. Um, the campaign I had backed like a couple of years ago was a book, and his goal again was like $2,000. He ends up beating it by like $50. And I'm like, oh my God, I would drive myself insane if I only beat it by $50, because I can imagine those last couple of days is just like, begging on the street. So his was set at 2K. I ended up setting mine at 2K as well. And I did that because I knew in the past, like I had said, I was able to raise $1,500 and $2,600 for charity, right? And if I could strategically place myself as a charity in the minds of my friends and acquaintances, then I could hopefully raise the $2,000. Currently, I'm at $2,700, so I blew by that goal. I think within 3 weeks. I was lucky enough to have a really supportive and amazing kind of internal network. So after that, it was about creating stretch goals. Let's raise some more money, and if we raise more money, here's what I'll do with it. The original $2,000 I had set aside as a goal to help actually pay for the direct publishing cost for the book. So each of these books going to cost money to actually, physically create. So using the money to actually do that, and then the rest of the money using it on marketing and maybe some more editing and some artwork, and really building out the book so it's not just like a piece of paper sitting on your coffee table, but like it's got a little bit more to it. Kind of like the fantasy books I remember growing up reading, where like sometimes it'd come with a map and I'd like take that out and like put it on my wall. So like when I'm reading, I could always look to it, or like artwork or like bookmarks or things like that. Right. So ultimately that's what I was planning on using the money for. And that's how I set my goal. And I was lucky enough to hit it in like 3 weeks, which is kind of unfortunate because I ended up making my campaign 60 days instead of like 30 days. So I've had, some extra time to raise more money, but also the momentum has kind of died down a little bit.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's interesting. That's a consideration. I don't know that anybody would necessarily think about beforehand. Well, what if I'm super successful and I kind of lose that momentum? Into it? Yeah, that's cool. That's great. That's great information.
Yeah, having some stretch goals in your back pocket of like, okay, if I actually hit my goal, right, fingers crossed. How do I keep enticing people to say like, keep donating, keep telling your friends about it?
Yeah, and that kind of leads to what you mentioned earlier, having additional media on hand, and artwork or videos or just other content to share to keep things kind of fresh and exciting and engaging, so that you're not just relying on the momentum of the individual backers, but you have something to kind of drip feed them along the way. Really cool, great information. So Sean, let's give folks a little bit of information about you. We're going to include a link to the campaign down below. We're recording this on a Wednesday night, and I'm going to do my best to get this out. I know you have a few days left in the campaign, so if folks want to support it, please definitely do that. I will include the link anywhere that this video is posted. But tell folks out there, anything else that you'd like to share for other authors, for people interested in crowdfunding, about the writing or publishing process, and how can they be in touch with you if they'd like to?
Yeah, sure. So I have a very kind of entrepreneurial background, and that's really served me well in trying to figure out the landscape of self-publishing. It's crazy out there. Like you said, there's thousands of articles about like what to do, what not to do, and kind of parse it all out. Can be challenging and a little bit overwhelming. I was lucky enough to have a few really like smart people that were close to me and supported me along the journey. But at the end of the day, it's a good reminder to know that it's a ton of hard work, but it's totally worth it. Getting an agent and going through like traditional publishing is amazing, like would be amazing. Like, that's the dream of everybody, right? Like get in advance, spend your days writing a book, playing video games and being tweeting on Twitter about like random musings and stuff. But the self-publishing journey is definitely a lot of fun and stressful and exciting and full of learning, and not just about learning about the process of self-publishing, but learning about yourself and like what you're capable of and what kind of obstacles you can overcome and kind of what impact you've had on the most random of people that you've reached out to. And they're like, yeah, totally, I'll back your book because I remember hanging out with you in 7th grade. At the end of the day, writing a book is very personal and vulnerable, and like it's a big, wonderful thing to do. And it's scary, and sometimes it seems like impossible, and you're never going to finish your book. And there's a million pitfalls and a million gatekeepers, and like that can often raise the level of fear like 10 notches. But there's actually like a line in my book, and I love this line so much. It goes, "You don't have to be brave all the time. You only have to be brave once." One time is really all it takes, and that can just change your life. For me, it was my friend during the 4th of July turning off the TV while we were watching Netflix and saying, "Me and you are going to write for half an hour. Start writing. Go." And it was 10 years of me taking notes and thinking about my characters and thinking about my books. And I was too scared to actually start. And instead, it was just one time I was like, I'm going to be brave right now for the next 30 minutes and just go. And here we are now, and I'm just trying to get this out into the world. So I think what I would say to people who are looking to be a writer or looking into self-publishing, that if you're a writer, or even if you just have a story in your head and you just want to tell it, just write. Like, it doesn't have to be good the first time or the second time or the 10th time. Like, trust me, I know my first draft, when I was writing it, I was like, this is amazing. I'm going to publish it next week. And then I spent like a month and I didn't read it. And I came back, I'm like, this is crap. Oh my God. But just the act of putting pen to paper or your fingers to your keyboard or even your lips to like dragon speech software, right? Like, that is of itself amazing. And, writing is so much fun, and self-publishing is hard and it's great, but it's super fun too. So my ultimate advice to like any writer out there or anyone who wants to write is just like, don't stop, just be brave and go for it. And there's great services like you to help you along the way.
Awesome. Well, Sean, I appreciate that. And yeah, folks, if you're interested in us, thank you for the plug, Sean. We have our website. I'll include some links as well in the video description. But yeah, I love that passion, and I think that message is important. Be brave, go for it. And we've got a life to live, and there are a lot of opportunities in front of us, and sometimes we hold ourselves back. And if you have a vision, you have a goal, you have something that you're reaching toward, be brave and go for it. So with that, Sean, I want to congratulate you on the completion of your book and the successful meeting of your goal, and the home stretch here. And yeah, thanks again for sharing some thoughts and experiences. And for the folks out there, I hope this information has been helpful. I would love to hear your comments, your thoughts, questions, anything that you thought of in the midst of listening to all of this, things that we can perhaps assist with or clarify on or expand on, or ideas for future videos and future content. We'd love to hear more about it. We want to be helpful to the folks out there who are building that courage and going for it. So thanks again, Sean. And folks, have a good evening. This is Rob Archangel of ArchangelLink.com.
Thanks. Bye.